Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a phenomenon that's surging pretty quietly all across the globe. Reports of demonic or Jinn possession. And the numbers are climbing so fast that institutions that have been skeptical for a long time are now being forced to sit up and pay attention. So let's kick things off with a number that's, well, it's pretty hard to wrap your head around. In Italy alone, a country famous for its incredible art and history, there are 500,000 reported cases of possession every single year. And no, that's not a typo. 500,000 annually.
And this isn't just an Italian thing, not at all. Over in the United States, the number of officially recognized exorcists has absolutely skyrocketed. Get this, in 2005, there were only 12. Today, there are over 150. That is more than a tenfold increase in less than 20 years.
Now, this is not just some random spike. This trend is so massive that back in 2018, the Vatican itself came out and said it urgently needed to train more exorcists just to handle the flood of cases. So what on earth is going on? Why is this all happening right now?
To really get a grip on what's happening today, we've got to look back to the true stories, the ones that inspired some of the most terrifying horror movies ever made.
Let's start with Anneliese Michel. She was a young German woman whose absolutely tragic story was the inspiration for the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. But as you're about to see, the reality was way more disturbing than anything Hollywood could ever come up with.
So here's where you see this incredible clash. You've got doctors on one side diagnosing her with epilepsy and psychosis. But then, medicine had zero explanation for how she could suddenly speak ancient Aramaic, or for the unbelievable physical torment she went through, like doing so many genuflections her knee ligaments snapped, or for those mysterious bite marks that appeared on her back where she couldn't even reach.
Okay, now let's rewind the clock, way back to 17th century France, to a case that shows just how this phenomenon can spread. This wasn't about just one person. This was a case of mass possession that grabbed a hold of an entire town.
So you have 17 nuns all at the same time starting to show the same terrifying symptoms. They all point the finger at a single priest, and the police even find what looks like a pact with the devil that he supposedly signed. But here's the kicker. Even after they execute him, the possessions don't stop. They continue for years. According to our source, this case is so important because it shows the potential for this kind of supernatural influence over a huge group of people, like a historical warning of a much bigger deception to come.
Now for a much more recent case, and this one is so chilling because it was so well documented by police, by doctors, and even by Child Protective Services. The official reports from what everyone started calling the Demon House in Indiana are just bone-chilling.
Just listen to this. This is a quote from Police Captain Charles Austin, a man with 30 years on the force. He, personally, with his own eyes, watched a 9-year-old boy walk backwards up a wall, do a complete flip over his mother, and land on his feet on the ceiling. And there was a social worker in the room who saw it too. His testimony was so powerful, it turned hardened skeptics into believers overnight.
These incredible stories of the supernatural bring us to a very real and very human danger. Because wherever you find that kind of fear and desperation, you are always going to find people who are willing to exploit it. You're going to find fraud and sometimes unimaginable cruelty.
Our source points to two absolutely heartbreaking examples of this. In Rawalpindi, a young girl was literally beaten to death during what was supposed to be an exorcism. It was just a tragic case of human brutality. Then in Karachi, you have a scammer who used a simple chemistry trick with sodium to make it look like he was setting Jinn on fire. Also, he could trick people and steal their money.
So how can you possibly tell the difference? Well, according to these spiritual experts cited in our source, there are some very clear red flags. A fraud, for instance, might ask for weirdly personal information, like your mother's name. They might use strange symbols or talismans, and they might insist on being alone with a female client. An authentic healer, or Rocky on the other hand, will only use scripture and will always require a male guardian to be present with a woman. It's a clear difference.
So this leads us to a really fundamental question. According to this spiritual framework, how does possession actually work? What are the mechanics behind this kind of spiritual takeover?
Okay, first we have to understand the entity itself. In this context, a Jinn is described as a being of pure energy. The analogy that's given is that it can move through a person's veins just like blood does, which lets it get into every single part of the body.
The process is explained in 3 basic stages. First, a person's spiritual defense, their aura, gets weakened.
Second, an extreme emotional state like pure terror or blinding rage basically creates an open door. And finally, the entity hijacks the central nervous system. This is the source's explanation for how someone could suddenly start speaking a language they've never heard before. It's not their brain doing it, it's an outside force controlling their body.
So let's connect all the dots. We've looked at the history, the mechanics, and the very real dangers. Now let's go back to that central question. Why is this all happening now? The source offers a final and pretty epic explanation. According to the scholars cited, the answer is both simple and deeply unsettling. We are believed to be living in the end times, a period when the veil that separates our physical world from the unseen world is becoming dangerously thin.
And why is the veil thinning? Well, it's seen as a preparation, a setup for the arrival of a great deceiver known as the Dajjal or the Antichrist. The idea is that this figure will use the now much more accessible powers of these entities to perform false miracles and mislead humanity on a massive global scale.
So, if you're facing that kind of a threat, what's the recommended defense? The source lays out a very clear spiritual shield. Consistent practices like ritual washing, always remembering God, performing the daily prayers, and reciting specific verses of Scripture that are known for their protective power.
And all of this brings us to one final lingering thought. The next time you're alone in a room and you get that feeling, you know the one, that you're not really alone, you have to ask yourself, is it just your imagination? Or is the veil between the worlds maybe a little thinner than you realize? The ultimate question isn't just whether these forces exist, but whether your own spiritual defenses are strong enough to face them.